And what I'd like to do is go through a little bit of history as to how we got here this evening. Last March, we submitted a grant application to the National Endowment for the Arts. Karen Fitzgerald and Amy Claggart were two key individuals in putting that together. And surprisingly enough, we were successful. The intent of that grant application was to look at an art center for the town of Peterborough and the surrounding area. Part of the grant application had some focus on a vacant building that we have at the old Armory, up where our present community center is. But it didn't limit it to that particular effort, but it was one option that laid in front of us.
So I'm a management consultant to people who build and operate cultural facilities. I've spent 25 years now roaming around, mostly North America, working for cities and schools and developers and arts organizations, mostly doing feasibility studies, business plans, and strategic plans for cultural facilities. Mostly theaters, because that's sort of how I started, but more recently more sort of multidisciplinary community arts facilities. I've done a fair amount of work around cultural districts. And I've worked in tiny towns of sort of 2,000 people to the biggest cities in America and in some other countries in the world. And the facilities are sort of tiny little community arts facilities all the way up to 20,000 seat commercial amphitheaters and sort of everything in between. There are two rounds to the work. The first is what we call the needs assessment, which is what, if anything, do you need? And then if we come out of that with a positive conclusion, yes, we think you need something and roughly here's what it is, then we begin a business plan for whatever the pieces are that come out of that first one. So today we're sort of 2/3 through the needs assessment. So we still have lots to do, but we're sort of at the point where we're starting to collect some early ideas around the 4 issues that determine whether or not you need facilities or whether or not facilities make sense. And those issues are, is there an audience for new facilities? So who lives here, who visits here, what do they like, what do they want? And is there sort of demand for more? So if there were more programs available in different places, would there be a larger audience to go? The second issue is, what's the level and nature of demand on the part of users? So who would be up on the stage, or who would be exhibiting on the walls, or who would be running programs in a space? And what's the nature of that demand? And fundamentally, does it suggest a busy facility? If you add it all up, if you did something with the lights be on enough nights of the year that it makes sense. Just in a very simple way, that's the most basic test for these things. Is it busy enough to justify doing it? The third issue is, what are the what are the facilities that already serve the market? So you've got 2 kinds of demand, audience demand and user demand, and then a supply. And we sort of look at everything and we can start to make a judgment about if there's an imbalance there, if there's a gap in the supply, if there's more demand, or if you're sort of okay there. But then it's the 4th issue called community benefits and impacts that's often the most important thing in a project like this, because we're saying, what role do the arts play in the future of your community, or what role could the development of new cultural facilities play in helping you get where you're trying to go as a community? So what are your aspirations around things like economic development, or cultural tourism, or improving the quality of life, or creating new educational opportunities? And how do those things sort of shape the answer? Facility, 80% of your audience typically comes from within 30 miles. Right? For more community facilities, it tends to be a smaller. So it's interesting, if you look at the 15-mile ring, so you're almost touching Keene and Milford. If you go out to 20 miles, if you're you're on the edge of Concord, you've got Manchester, so it's a bigger distance. And it doesn't, of course, take into account the topography, sort of the north-south topography that makes things a little more difficult. So they're saying when you get out to 15 miles, your market area population is about 75,000. So that's a small market, that's sort of interesting for within that region. Then you go out to a 30-mile ring, it's essentially 10 times that. The population grows by a factor of 10 to about 750,000. And then when you go to the 45-mile radius, you're at 2.25 million. Look at Peterborough and how high you are on the population with graduate professional degrees and with bachelor's degrees. It's an amazingly well-educated community, right? You're basically double national averages. And the rings, 15, 30, and 45 miles, are also over national averages. All right, so here's the age profile. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Look at the 65 plus for Peterborough.
What are we going to say?
And let's just for the 15 and 30 mile range, you're sort of on national average in the older, in the 65 plus, well over the national average for really the 45 to 64. So look at the yellow, orange, and red, and the 45 to 54s and the 55 to 64. Household income, you have both in the 150,000 plus household income group, you are well over the national averages both locally and in the region. If you look out at that 45-mile ring, it's a very affluent population. Same thing also in the 100 to 150. This doesn't really account for cost of living, which might sort of skew things a little bit for those living in more sort of expensive suburban areas. But certainly for those living closer to here, those are high income. So let me sort of throw it open to you based on these issues. What, if any, facilities make sense to you? That's the big question. Then some sort of more sort of subtle questions within that. How important are seasonal residents and visitors in understanding the market? You know, this is one of those communities where it's different in the summer. In weekends, lots of people come here on a part-time basis, and I think this is one of those communities where people start off as visitors, then they become seasonal residents, and over time they become full-time residents. So how do we think of those segments of the population as being an important part of the market or not? When and where does it make sense to improve current facilities as opposed to building new ones? That's sort of one of our options here. What do you think is the future of Peterborough, and what role should the arts play in helping you get there? That's coming back to my fourth question. And then what more do we need to know and understand in order to make valid conclusions and recommendations about all of this? So the typical model for a community art center, which is really the idea that was put on the table, typical community art center, you might have one or two, probably one space that's a good performance space, another room that's less formal, sort of a multi-purpose room that can do smaller performances, rehearsals, special events, a gallery space, a set of classroom spaces, public space. Sometimes the public arts often gets the short end of the stick, and the gallery space also serves as a lobby, but if you're lucky you get a proper sort of secure climate-controlled exhibit space. And then whatever else you think makes sense.
First of all, Rodney, was I right in what I now remember of the article in the paper? Are we looking at an existing building called the Garage that's adjacent to the Armory?
There was a specific space which was sort of the basis, or at least a part of that application to the NEA for the Art Town grant, but I think we've been given the opportunity to step back and not be limited to that specific opportunity.
With the exception of the players, none of those are adequate for theater.
Right.
If that's what you want to do.
Right.
What are we trying to attract in the area? And I think that the spaces and the conversations, we're really artistic community trying to market, the same events to the same 10 people in town. And I think that with an arts center, we could really be a driving factor in bringing people and bringing dollars into the area, and bringing those and creating a space that people would come in from out of town on a Friday night to see a performer at a great performance space.
And my question is probably more to Mr. Bartlett, is the grant money that has been raised, can it be used to perhaps negotiate with some use of the space of the Peterborough Players? I mean, take the existing space that we have and either help to upgrade it to what would be more acceptable, rather than spend money on a building that, I'm sorry, but having lived in this area for 25 years, it has a great summer population, but you're going to be hard pressed to be able to pay for the building in the winter time.
So I can answer that. So it may well be that the first round of our work says the market will not support a new building all by itself. Well, period. The thing to do is to make investments in current facilities or explore other partnerships in that. Or what about, we've heard that Conval High School has formed a committee to look at a new performing arts facility as a part of the school. So maybe there's a partnership opportunity there that we could work with them, make that a community school partnership in order to pursue something.
I have two thoughts. One is that we wouldn't want to, I don't think we would want to do something that would undermine the support of existing places, like the Mariposa gets a little fee to use their space, or Bass Hall, or, so that they sort of go under or have a harder time. And another thought that I keep having is the population 25 to 30-year-olds was way low, including my daughter who fled to the city. And and one possibility might be to include sort of an incubator studios or something for possibly young artists, or maybe age shouldn't be the thing, but somehow to support the young people sticking around.
And for years I thought, I wish there were a way we could have the community and the school get together on a good performing arts facility that could be jointly used, and the need is there, and I think it is time that at least it gets some discussion. So I was glad to hear at least somebody has broached that subject.
It would be, I think, essential that whatever is adapted, built, or whatever, that it needs to have, an open, friendly way of parking there.
When we look at market analyses, let's not get hung up on how we divide the pie that exists. Let's focus on growing the pie, because we've got, as the map there showed, we have a very affluent population within an hour's drive, and a large population, and we can be leveraging that better.
Of course, I think Peterborough is the cultural center, and I think the investment really needs to be in maybe providing resources so that all of the different businesses and cultural organizations can work together. I think the spirit is there, the spirit of cooperation. We just need a little more bandwidth to make that happen. But if we could invest, say, $20,000 in a media blitz to the Boston area that invites people to come to Peterborough for every weekend of the summer or the fall or whatever, that's going to have a huge impact. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't do something with the Conval project. I think that's intriguing, or improve the resources we have. But as Will said, the center already exists.
I think coming up in June, the Thing in the Spring brings musicians from all around cities, around the world actually, for a weekend of just great music, and it coincides with the Broke Arts Fair. A lot of younger artists as well involved with that. And I've noticed with the unfortunate downturn in the real estate market, it's been a good thing. I've noticed some younger people moving into town and being able to afford to live here actually. And so something like this may be beneficial to them as well. They're a good venue for the great rocking concert.
In order to keep the arts as a vital part of Peterborough, what are the next investments that have to be made, or do you think it'll just happen on its own? I mean, are you confident that this can remain sort of an arts town, are artists going to continue to move here and work here? And do you need to make an investment in order for this to be an arts community that can carry Peterborough forward?